Murphy with Arizona Farm Bureau, and it's our weekly Talk to a Farmer Friday. So many of you that pay attention to what we cover and what we do, you know that we're on a wine. Julie Murphy with Arizona Farm Bureau, and it's Talk to a Farmer Friday today. We're doing the wine series. You may have noticed that we just changed spots. We're having some Wi-Fi issues, but you know what? Jim, we've had a lot of conversations around this kitchen table, right?
Yeah.
Yep. And I love this place, and I've always appreciated you and Ruth hosting me when I've come out here. I think I stayed overnight in the guest room at least 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
So to kind of walk us back to where we were before, I always loved the story of how you and Ruth met, and you had just finished speaking at a conference/convention, and you guys were on a plane together.
Yeah, what I was saying is we met in Reno, Nevada.
Yeah.
And I was at a conference with the American Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers. And I was involved in some panel discussions there regarding my experience in Slovakia. And I was also involved in a program that Successful Farming Magazine took nationwide called the MAX program. And it was to promote conservation farming, conservation tillage. And this was in the early 1990s. So it was a big deal back then. As good luck would have it, we sat next to each other on the airplane. We flew from Reno to Denver, Colorado. Ruth lived in Denver, and I was on my way on to Kansas to speak to a group there. So we hit it off pretty well, and on the way into Denver, there were some really ugly storm clouds, and I mentioned to Ruth, it looks really bad. And she said, well, it looks like that all the time. And we parted at the airport, and I went on to Kansas, and she went home. And about a week later, I got a letter in the mail with a newspaper article that it had snowed a foot. This was on the 13th of November, so it was a little bit early for that kind of event.
Yeah.
But we started writing letters back and forth, and eventually, the next year we got married.
That's awesome.
She joined the farming operation in Iowa, and we've been together 30 years.
That's so cool. And then kind of going back a little bit earlier, you had said that, farming in the Midwest, but her parents kind of solicited you to consider coming out here and helping with their pistachio orchard.
Yeah,
right?
While we were farming in Iowa, my father-in-law passed away. And my mother-in-law invited us to come to Arizona to take over the pistachio orchard. So
wow.
In 1998, we moved to Cochise, Arizona.
Did you have any apprehension? That's a big difference. You had livestock, corn, soybeans, some of the typical crops in the Midwest, and all of a sudden you're coming out to Arizona to manage a pistachio orchard.
Well, I'll tell you, the first time I came here, I thought it was the most godforsaken place I'd ever been.
Really? Yeah.
But over time, I've come to love it. We're actually in a beautiful area.
You are.
We have a lot of good resources. The soil is good. The water is good. The sunshine is wonderful. And I don't know if you know Iowa or not, but it gets cold there.
It does get cold there. And I love Iowa, and it's always so beautifully green. I've been lucky. When I have been there, it's not normally when it's so crazy cold.
Well, I decided I never wanted to be cold again, and we moved to Arizona.
There you go. So maybe the decision wasn't that hard, but it's quite a contrast and quite a difference. And we're sure glad that you showed up in Arizona because, Jim, just the things that you've done as a volunteer leader for Arizona Farm Bureau, the community engagement that both you and Ruth have always been in, it's amazing to be able to watch some of these farm families and see that the things that you do. And you have so much more to your story. I always feel like I'm missing out on some of the other little caveats to it. But let's fast forward to wine grape growing. What inspired that?
Well, I had a lot to learn about growing pistachios, and we soon learned that pistachios are alternate bearing. They'll have a large crop one year and a small crop the next. And that's primarily because the fruit on pistachio trees grows on year-old wood. So that fruit bud has to develop a year before it actually produces fruit. And so in a year when there are a lot of fruit buds, or a lot of fruit, I should say, there's not as much energy going into developing new fruit buds for the next year. So we can have a pretty wide swing in production on the rootstocks and the cultivars that we use in our existing orchards.
And because of that diversity, if it's a bad year in pistachios or those, like you said, alternating bearing fruit trees, you've still got the wine grapes.
Yeah. And to really answer your question, when we started looking at grapes, we were pleased to note that they would pretty much have a productive crop every year. The fruit on grapevines grows on new growth. And it's also the pollination doesn't occur until into June. With the pistachios, the pollination occurs early in the season, which makes them vulnerable to frost events.
Oh, wow.
And we're at high elevation here. We're 4,350 feet. And we have frost protection wind machines and other burners that we use to try to keep the temperature in the orchards high enough. And in most years, we do just fine with our frost protection. Occasionally, it can be a problem, and we like the idea that grapes should produce a fairly consistent crop every year.
So, speaking of the germination or the, when they are starting to bloom or become fruitful. So with pistachios, it's typically in March and April and May?
Yeah, very end of March, early April. The first 2 weeks of April are probably our most vulnerable time for, if there's going to be a frost event, it's typically at that time.
And then to your point, what you said earlier, then with the wine grapes, they're starting to fruit basically in May and June.
Yeah.
Okay.
And pistachios have to have both male and female trees, and the grapes are self-pollinating,
right.
So we don't have the pollination issues that we would with pistachios.
Yeah, because isn't it like one male pollinating tree to every how many females?
Usually between, out of a block of 15 trees, there'd be one male and 14 females.
Okay. Yeah, so to me, it's pretty complicated. Pistachios are pretty complicated to grow. So tell me about some of the grape varieties that you grow.
We have 9 red varieties.
Okay.
We used to have 10. After years of trying to make Zinfandel work for us, we finally decided that we needed to go a different direction, and we've eliminated the Zinfandel grapes and have replaced them with Ionico, which is a red Italian grape, and we've had some success with that.
Now, why did you pick all reds? I'm just curious.
Well, again, because we're high elevation and there can be some frost issues. The white grapes tend to bud out earlier than the red.
Okay.
So when we started with grapes, I knew nothing about growing grapes, and I hired a person that purported to know some about grapes, and we thought that maybe it would be a good idea that we didn't plant any white grapes. So we have all red grapes.
And part of that might have been the frost. You live in a beautiful area, but it almost also feels like we're kind of in a little, sloped down area.
Well, we're where we're at right now. We're up close to the foothills or the base of the Dragoon Mountains to our south, and the Gunnison Hills to our west.
It's just beautiful here.
And we're higher on the elevation. Many people would know that Wilcox, the Sulphur Springs Valley is really a basin, and there's no rivers that flow out of this valley. And we're high on the elevation, and everything slopes toward the dry lake.
So you're
Wilcox.
higher than the basin. Okay.
Yeah.
To me, you're a farmer first. And you've talked a little bit about growing grapes versus pistachios. Pistachios, from what I've heard, seems a little bit more complicated. But what's interesting and unique that you've discovered over the years now that you've been growing these 9 different varieties of red grapes?
Well, and I didn't fully answer your question, and I mentioned the Zinfandel, which we don't have anymore. We also have Syrah, Sangiovese, Cabernet Sauvignon, Petit Syrah, Grenache, Mourvedre, or Mourvèdre, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot, and then, of course, the Aglianico.
Yeah. So, but what's been unique then about growing?
Well,
wine
the thing, when I farmed in Iowa, everything was mechanized. You know, I had big John Deere tractors and big John Deere combines, and kind of like that style of farming. But when we moved to Arizona, the pistachios are mechanized, but they still require quite a bit of hands-on management. And then once we moved to the grapes, they take a lot of hands-on management. We're fortunate that we have access to good labor crews. Thank you, Rod Keeling, if you're watching. And we there's a lot of labor that goes into the grapes. A lot of labor.
And they are trying to automate it. I do see that in California, but California's got acres and acres and acres and acres, and the price point for that and the scale of it might make automation a little bit easier to apply there than here. And we've certainly got more acres today in Arizona in grapes than we did yesterday. Again, a low water use crop. People love to hear that. But for both your pistachios and your wine grapes, you do have both of them on drip. So
yes,
it's very specific, very targeted. We as cotton farmers, we've gotten pretty sophisticated with our cotton farming. We can get down to 3.5 acre feet per acre, I think, maybe even 3 acre feet per acre of water. But still, wine grapes, you guys are only using an acre and a quarter.
Little an acre foot to an acre, maybe up to an acre and a quarter, an acre and a half at most. A lot depends what our weather conditions are through the year. But
sure.
And that was one of the key factors in us deciding to grow grapes, is because they take half as much water as many other crops and produce a high value crop.
Right.
That's the biggest part of it. We could generate more income with the grapes per acre than most of the crops that are grown here in the Sulphur Spring Valley can produce.
I know that about 80, I hear different percentages, but about 75 to 85% of the wine grapes are grown in Wilcox.
Yeah.
And a lot of the wine making is taking place in one of the AVAs, the Verde Valley up north. But a lot of that wine making is happening here now, here in the Wilcox area as well. You were at first just going to grow grapes.
That's right.
What made you decide to hop into the value add side of it?
Well, it was kind of like boiling a frog. I mean, when we started growing grapes, like I said, we didn't know anything about it. We planted a relatively small block. We had 4 acres to start with, and they grew well. They seemed to be prospering, and so we added some more grapes and added some more. But we hadn't really developed any kind of market to sell the grapes. In addition to having the grapes, you have to have somebody that's willing to buy it. We had talked to a number of wineries that were interested in buying our grapes. And it wasn't long after we really got into production that our production exceeded what we were able to sell. And I hated to let grapes go to waste, so we worked with Page Spring Cellars and Arizona Stronghold, and they made some really fine wines for us, and we were pretty happy with how that was going. And so we have a little bit of wine, and then we had to have a way to sell it. So we started to do wine festivals. And when I planted the vineyard, we knew that was going to be a challenge. And then eventually we got our own winery, and I thought that would be a challenge. But what we really weren't prepared for was the marketing side of it. And you can have the best wine in the world, and if people don't know about it, you can't sell it.
No.
We participated in a number of nationwide wine competitions, the San Francisco Chronicle, the American Wine Society, Tasters Guild wine competition, and we did pretty well. So we were encouraged to continue to grow, and it just kind of happened accidentally, but ultimately we did have our own winery. We ran our tasting room here at the farm through 1919, and then excuse me,
2019.
wrong century, 2019. Right before COVID hit, we opened a tasting room in Wilcox, and that was another challenge that we weren't really expecting. And then since then, we've purchased another building in Wilcox, the old Chevy building, and we invite people to come and taste our wine there and see some of the history of Wilcox.
It's awesome. And people can still come to your private tasting room, but they have to make an appointment, correct?
Yeah, we're open by appointment if you have a group.
And that, when I say that private, that's here at your home, downstairs.
Yeah. And we've tried to move our business more into the tasting room in Wilcox because we have the investment there. We have an excellent tasting room manager, Dale Angel, and he's very accommodating. And if people want to come, especially if they want to see Ruth and me, we often make trips into Wilcox to meet with groups. So.
That's awesome. And your wine has definitely got a following, and it's definitely popular with those that are familiar with it. I think his last name is Poole, Mr. Poole. I even had him interviewed for a conversation article. He loves your wine. He's a sommelier, and he is the one that also loves that you do the pistachios, and he gets into this whole taste profile of how wonderful pistachios are with Golden Rule wine. And so I don't know if you remember him at all, but
we meet a lot of people.
Yeah, you meet a lot.
And I would probably recognize him.
Yeah.
And I don't want to indicate that I wouldn't know him, but but one of the things, of course, we knew nothing about growing grapes or making wine, and we've been very fortunate that the wines here, especially in the Wilcox area, the grapes make very good wine. We were just fortunate that Ruth's parents decided to start growing pistachios here, and then we expanded into the vineyard, and the grapes are good and makes good wine.
Yeah. And talking about challenges, and you alluded to that a little bit in the whole wine business, one of them being the marketing. You would have never imagined how much marketing you had to do to create this value add product, AKA wine, and then all of a sudden, oops, no matter how wonderful my wine is, I can maybe win all the greatest awards in the world, and if they don't know about it, they're not going to drink it. So beyond that hurdle, what are some of the other challenges you've seen? Is it the battle of the bugs a lot with these, or probably the battle of the birds more than anything, right?
Yeah, all the above.
All the above.
Arizona is a great place to grow grapes, but it's also very challenging. I would be wrong to imply that it's easy. We do have issues with some insects. We've had to deal with a small amount of Pierce's disease that we had to overcome. It's just farming. There's always going to be some critter out there that wants to sample our grapes or our pistachios. So the birds are an issue. We try to do things kind of environmentally friendly. We used to do a lot of bird netting for our grapes, but it was very labor intensive and cost prohibitive to put out netting and take it back in when we're trying to harvest. We just went with electronic bird deterrence, and kind of figured, well, we're gonna lose a few grapes along the way. So
You're sharing your grapes with the birds because
well,
they know they're quality grapes. But yeah, I've even heard that a lot of times some of the wineries will use hawks and birds of prey,
falcons,
and
yeah,
falcons
yeah.
in that wild. It's just amazing, the wine industry and all the things you have to worry about. Let's fast forward to today's tourism industry, and we really have to give a lot of credit to the Arizona Office of Tourism and the fact that now they can promote an amazing and robust wine industry, small in comparison to a California and a Washington state, but unique to us because of the amazing quality of wine we produce. But talk a little bit about, even in the last few years, have you felt that change, and has it benefited you now that you have tasting rooms in downtown Wilcox? What's your take on the tourism aspect of things?
Well, obviously customers are the key.
Right.
Again, you can have the best wine in the world, but if you don't have customers, you don't have a business.
Right.
We are participants in the Wilcox Wine Country organization here that is focused on Wilcox area wineries and tasting rooms. We do wine festivals related to, there's 2 festivals in Wilcox, one in May, 3rd weekend in May, 3rd weekend in October. You get a good crowd to come and visit. We do other festivals, and one of the key things, again, that we weren't prepared for, and you're an expert on this, but social media. I've got a smartphone, but it takes time to sit down and try to capture people, and we have to post fairly regularly, and that's something we've had to learn, and probably don't do it well enough, but we want people to look for us, and we have Facebook, and of course we're online, and hopefully people will look for Golden Row Vineyards.
Yes. What makes Arizona wine special, besides some of the things that we've already talked about from your perspective?
Well, my perspective, and I'm kind of the second wave of this industry. There were some early pioneers. We know that Sonoyta was the first AVA, and there were some vineyards over there. And we got started like around 2005 is when we first started making plans, and there was some growth at that time. I think part of it is there were some really good enterprising winemakers that came and decided that Arizona might be a place to grow grapes. I can't go without mentioning Eric Glomsky was an excellent early example for us. Kent Callaghan for sure over in Sonoyta, and there's I start naming them and I'll leave somebody out, but those are 2 of the people we certainly look to as being leaders, developing really good grapes, good wine. And there seemed to be demand. Our customer base was in a lot of respects was probably 50 to 65 years old or older, and we've seen that kind of change a little bit. We'd like to make sure that people know that in addition to some of the negative publicity about wine, there's some really good health aspects to wine too. And we certainly encourage people to drink responsibly, but there are good health benefits to wine, and we think that Arizona wine is just as good as anybody else's. We get people here from other places, and they come in and they say, we really didn't expect Arizona wine to be this good. And it competes fairly well, especially in these nationwide contests with any wine that's being made in the U.S.
Yeah. And I hear that so often, that same phrase, we didn't expect the wines in Arizona to be that good. And, the Jim Grahams of Golden Rule, the Kent Callagans of Callaghan Wines, we've got Todd and Kelly Bostocks of Dos Cabezas, and you mentioned Eric Glomsky. By the way, I interview him next Friday.
Huh.
So, and I'm the same way. I'm leaving way too many wonderful winemakers out, but we're going to try to be getting to them. We're going to pivot kind of to like, and I'm a little bit sad about this, but I'm excited for you guys for your future. So you might be selling your farm.
Well, yeah, you know, agriculture has traditionally been an intergenerational thing. It would go on for years and years and generation to generation, and older folks would help the young folks get started, but it was usually because of you know, sons and daughters.
Mm-hmm.
And we have three wonderful kids, and they're all professionals that chose career paths that do not include farming.
Mm-hmm.
And well, I've been known to say that I picked a bad time to get old, but it's time that somebody else operate this operation, and we'd like to see. I think if this country really wants to continue to have a good food supply, not just vineyards and pistachios, but any kind of food supply, they need to work pretty hard to have programs that can help young people that have the talent and have the ambition to get into agriculture. And I'm not sure they exist right now. We need more of the old Farmers Home Administration help, where you could start with a pretty low interest loan, and it would help. It would help the old people get out,
right,
and help the young people get started. So
you mentioned that earlier. You said something. We always talk about the tough entry point for the young farmers, and your comment was it's a tough exit point for older farmers, and we all kind of have to retire. There's another concern you have, and it relates to the water, and it relates to the fact that the Arizona Department of Water Resource, even though by an overwhelming majority of 60%, Wilcoxians, is that how we say it, voted down any regulation, or at least the regulation under the traditional AMA, and yet you've already been put under a preliminary AMA.
yeah,
It's like the people didn't get to choose on that one.
well, and we are concerned. We'd be foolish to think that there's no water issue here.
Right.
And the problem that we have with the AMA is that it doesn't provide for any flexibility. When we talk about our vineyards taking an acre foot of water, or slightly over that, if all the acres that are being farmed in the Wilcox Basin were grapes, we wouldn't have a water issue. But that's not all the historical agriculture that exists here. My master's degree was in ag economics, and we usually would think that economics will determine how things should be done, and we believe that high value, low water use crops will be the direction that the Sulphur Springs Valley needs to go, the Wilcox Basin. And we're encouraged, Ed Curry,
Mm-hmm.
he's got some really interesting crops that are taking very little water, and maybe we need to change the paradigm
Mm-hmm.
of what we grow
Right.
and how we make our money. Maybe we don't need to be growing the traditional crops. Maybe we need to look for things like grapes. We think our pistachios are very water frugal.
Yep, they are.
And we think that economics need to be a driving force. But again, the problem with the AMA is it doesn't allow the flexibility to do that. And that's...
And what you're concerned is, I thought off camera we kind of talked about, is that you want somebody to buy this with all of the things happening with the water issues right now. That's something that any buyer has to consider, right?
Yeah, we right now the way the AMA is set up, we have to establish our water usage um, for a year, starting the 1st of April. And we've had flow meters on our wells, and we have a pretty good idea how much water we use. But then I need to be able to document that for the ADWR. And so it takes us to the end of March next year. And at that time, before that time, we have to apply for this guaranteed water right, because right now I don't have that.
Mm.
And once we apply for it, there's a public review period from the end of March until October, that all the applications that are made for this guaranteed water right are reviewable by the public. So there will be no guaranteed water rights granted until at least the end of October of 2026. Well, that's 2 crop seasons for us. That's 2025 and 2026. And that's a period of time that I cannot guarantee to a new buyer that they would have the water right, even for the existing irrigated land, let alone other land that we own that was purchased and developed, and investment was made. There's substantial capital investment, and there is a provision in the AMA for substantial capital investment, but we get very little guidance, and we won't have any ruling on the acreage we have until that October period of 2026.
Prior to all of this and this imposition of the AMA on the Wilcox Basin, did I say that right?
Yeah.
Did you have water rights?
Well, not as such. I mean, this basin, there was literally unlimited
Okay. Get it.
water use.
Okay.
And, it all goes back to 1980 Groundwater Act that certain areas of the state, and you would be familiar with this, the Phoenix area, Casa Grande, the Pinal County, all the way down to Tucson. And Prescott was established as an AMA. There are other areas that had some water restrictions. The Wilcox Basin did not have any of that restriction.
Your right was if you had a pump, if you
Yeah.
had a well, you could pump it.
Yeah.
And to emphasize for any of our listeners, Joel, let me know if anybody's made a comment or had a question. To any of our listeners, farmers are not advocating no regulation. You know that you have a challenge here. You do want to fix it. The way currently the state government is trying to fix it is not workable.
Well,
right?
Yeah, and what essentially happens, and of course this is my view of it, but it basically fixes the pumping that is being done now that people are most concerned with. And it doesn't allow any of the flexibility for high value, low to water use crops like vineyards.
And so what can happen too, this is just with any vineyard, you can't necessarily, you're not going to be able to plant more vineyards or more wine grapes that are low water use wine.
That's correct.
Correct?
Yeah.
Now now on the hopeful side of it, we always need to be hopeful. On the hopeful side of it is there's a bill going through the legislature that I believe Senator Tim Dunn is one of the sponsors for. It's looking good, and it's one of those bills that's trying to fix and build flexibility into the legislation and ultimately the rulemaking, so that this flexibility allows farmers to keep farming, industry to keep growing, because if they shut it down, everybody's going to have to move out of the Wilcox Basin. So what's your take on the bill, and are you encouraged? And
I've reviewed the bill. I'm very pleased. Tim, who I knew through some of my Farm Bureau connections back years ago, I'm real pleased that he's taken a leadership position in that. And it does fix some of the issues that we had the most concern about. It recognizes that there are other crops that might be of beneficial use, and maybe we can make some modifications. Maybe not every acre needs to be corn or cotton or alfalfa.
Right.
Maybe we can grow rosemary or other crops that would allow farmers to continue to farm with very limited amounts of water and still make a living here. And we're concerned about what would happen to the economy of Wilcox if agriculture shuts down. This is an agricultural community, and without agriculture, it would dry up and float away.
Yeah, dry up and float away. And you basically can grow just about anything here. And we've proven that we can grow amazing wine grapes.
Yeah. So we'd like to see that flexibility exist where people can experiment with other crops and just make the best use of the water that we have. Water is a critical resource, and we live here. We don't want to run out of water.
Right.
So we just want to see it being used for the best reasons possible.
Well, Jim, you and Ruth have done some amazing things out here, and I know we need to give credit to her parents for having been inspired to put in a pistachio orchard. I would assume as farmers they grew other crops as well.
Well, my father-in-law grew up in eastern Colorado during the Dust Bowl days. His name was Victor Nilsson, and they experienced the Dust Bowl, and he also served admirably during World War II, and actually was injured and wasn't able to farm. Always had an interest in farming, and it's one of the reasons they got involved in pistachios.
Okay.
My mother-in-law was from a farm in South Dakota near the Black Hills, and again also was served in World War II in the Navy. And her name was Hazel Nilsson, and we wouldn't have this without.
No, we definitely would not have this. And if anybody doesn't get out to Wilcox, you need to get out to Wilcox because you need to see the amazing farming in general and the awesome wine grapes that people like Jim Graham grow. So I've got an illustrious list of wine growers that I'm interviewing. I'm going to be interviewing Eric Glomsky. I'm going to be interviewing Rod Keeling and several others. Is there anybody else? I want to get Kent Callaghan and the Bostocks, but they haven't responded to my invitations for my open dates. So you might have to put in a good word for me, Jim. Yeah. So thank you so much. God bless you, and thanks for letting us hang out with you again on this beautiful Friday morning.
All right. Well, thank you.
All right.